Welcome to This Explainer. Today, we're going to completely shatter a deeply ingrained cultural myth. You know the one, have you ever looked at a star athlete, a brilliant musician, or a wildly successful CEO and just thought, wow, they just have a gift? Well, we're diving straight into researcher Angela Duckworth's groundbreaking work on a concept called grit to figure out why our total obsession with giftedness might actually be the exact thing holding us back. To really get this, we have to start with a deeply personal story from Duckworth herself. So, growing up, her dad was constantly bringing up the topic of exceptional intelligence. He'd literally just look at her during dinner out of nowhere and say, you're no genius. He was just obsessed with innate intellect and worried his kids weren't measuring up to Einstein. And that sets the stage for a pretty massive irony decades later when Angela Duckworth was actually awarded the prestigious MacArthur Fellowship, an award that is, wait for it, literally known as the Genius Grant. A girl who was repeatedly told she lacked genius ultimately won an award for being one. And this raises a fascinating mystery, right? One that decades of psychologists have tried to solve. If raw intelligence or natural talent doesn't guarantee success, if being a quote-unquote genius isn't the golden ticket we all think it is, then what on earth is? Like, what actually allows some people to push through the most impossible barriers, while others, who seem completely and naturally gifted, just kind of fade away? Well, let's look at Section 1, Surviving the Beast. To see how this plays out in the real world, we're going to look at one of the most high-stakes environments imaginable, the United States Military Academy at West Point. Just getting accepted here requires top-tier SAT scores, exceptional grades, and flawless physical fitness. But then they hit initiation summer, known appropriately as Beast Barracks. Just look at this brutal daily schedule. Wake up at 5 a.m. sharp, grueling physical training by 5:30. Then it's just a non-stop rotation of marching, classes, weapons training, and athletics until lights out at 10 p.m. No weekends, no real breaks. And despite the intense vetting to even get in, an astonishing 1 in 5 of these elite cadets drops out. So you really have to ask yourself, who spends 2 whole years trying to get into a place just to drop out in the first 2 months? For decades, the military used something called a whole candidate score. It was a meticulously calculated, perfect blend of academic aptitude and physical talent, designed to predict exactly who would survive this ordeal. But here's the crazy part. That talent score completely failed. The cadets with the absolute highest scores were just as likely to drop out as the ones with the lowest. Instead, Duckworth came in and introduced a new psychological metric called the grit scale, focusing purely on passion and stamina. And guess what? This new scale predicted retention perfectly. And this wasn't just a military thing, it actually illustrates a universal truth. This same stamina metric reliably predicted success across a massive variety of challenging fields. When they tested it in the field, grit identified which candidates would make it through the grueling Green Berets selection course. It predicted which sales professionals would keep their jobs despite facing nonstop projection. It even forecast which students in the Chicago public schools would graduate, and which kids would outstudy everyone else to reach the finals of the Scripps National Spelling Bee. Which brings us to Section 2, the naturalness bias. So if perseverance and stamina are the actual keys to survival and success, why are we still so completely obsessed with naturals? Why do we fawn over people who just seem to succeed without trying? Well, researcher Chia Jung Se brilliantly exposed our cultural hypocrisy here. In national surveys, Americans always say we value hard work over intelligence. But Se's experiments revealed a hidden prejudice. When she played identical audio clips for professional musicians, telling them one player was a natural and the other was a striver, the experts overwhelmingly judged the natural as more likely to succeed. So we say we value effort, but secretly, we heavily favor those who just seem effortlessly talented. And this blind spot is incredibly severe, especially in the business world. In one experiment, investors were asked to evaluate entrepreneurs. For an actively striving entrepreneur to be viewed as merely equal to a natural in the eyes of these investors, the striver needed a staggering 4 more years of leadership experience and $40,000 more in startup capital. We literally penalize people who have to work hard for their skills, all because we are so totally mesmerized by the illusion of innate greatness. Well, let's dive into Section 3, Effort Counts Twice. So, how does this all build into a mathematically sound framework that finally explains human achievement? Because if effort really does matter more than talent, we need a way to prove it. For centuries, going all the way from Charles Darwin to the modern corporate culture at firms like McKinsey, we've fallen for this massive oversimplified illusion. We look at someone's innate talent and we just draw a straight, unbroken line directly to achievement. We assume, if you're smart enough or physically gifted enough, the end result is basically guaranteed.
But here is the paradigm-shifting math that Duckworth developed to explain what's actually happening behind the scenes. Ready? Talent times effort equals skill. And then skill times effort equals achievement. Do you see what happens there? Talent only dictates how fast you improve, but effort mathematically counts twice. First, you have to apply effort to your raw talent just to build a foundational skill. And then you have to apply effort a second time to that newly acquired skill to actually turn it into a tangible achievement in the real world.
Think about master potter Warren McKenzie or the incredibly famous novelist John Irving, who happens to be severely dyslexic. Neither of these guys considered themselves naturally gifted at all. Mackenzie famously joked, "The first 10,000 pots are difficult, and then it gets a little bit easier." And John Irving needed significantly more time to read and write than any of his peers. Yet both proved that extraordinary artistic output is really just an accretion of mundane acts. It's endless pots thrown on a wheel or relentless painstaking rewriting of a novel day after day until skill transforms into masterpiece. All right, section 4, the elements of grit. So, how do we actually define, measure, and cultivate this incredible stamina for ourselves? What exactly makes up this concept of grit? Actor Will Smith famously captured this mindset perfectly with his treadmill metaphor. He openly admits he's never viewed himself as particularly talented, but he proudly states his ridiculous, sickening work ethic is what truly sets him apart. He literally says, "If we get on the treadmill together, there's two things. You're getting off first or I'm going to die." That sheer, uncompromising refusal to be outworked, that is the beating heart of grit. To back this up with actual science, we can look back to a fascinating study from 1940. Harvard researchers actually used a treadmill to test this exact concept. They made young, healthy college men run on a punishingly steep, incredibly fast treadmill for up to 5 minutes. It was specifically designed to be exhausting and agonizing. And the goal wasn't to measure aerobic capacity. No, they wanted to gauge stamina and pure strength of will. They wanted to see who would push through the punishment and who would just quit. Decades later, a psychiatrist named George Valiant tracked down those exact same men when they were in their 60s, and the results were absolutely mind-blowing. The sheer amount of time those guys stayed on the treadmill back when they were 20 turned out to be an incredibly reliable predictor of their psychological well-being and professional success throughout their entire adult lives. Their willingness to suffer for just an extra minute on that treadmill predicted their resilience and the long marathon of life. And that brings us to the two essential pillars of grit that we all need to cultivate. Because listen, grit is not just a brief burst of intense, short-term obsession. Grit is passion, meaning enduring devotion and staying absolutely loyal to a single, high-level goal over years or even decades. And it's perseverance, the ability to bounce back from crushing setbacks, swallow your pride after a massive failure, and show up the very next day ready to get right back to work. Ultimately, your raw potential is just the starting line. What you choose to do with it is quite another story. Which leaves us with one final, vital question for your own journey. Whether you're building a business, learning a brand new craft, or just navigating life's everyday hurdles, when the incline goes up and things get undeniably hard, how long will you stay on the treadmill?